Hello student, welcome to my lecture series. Myself Dr. Sangita Bhamare, S.V.K.T. College, Deolali Camp, Nasik. In last lecture, we people saw about the characteristics of population. So basically, we were discussed in that lecture about the population. So in that, what we saw the population density, right? Means how one can calculate, one can analyze this population when we are interested in this particular topic. Then we saw how this population affects, or how this birth rate, which is nothing but the natality, how death rate, which is nothing but the mortality, responsible or affects on the population density, right? So in that, what we saw in the characteristics of population, we saw the population density, in which how one can analyze this population. Then we saw what is meant by the natality, concept of natality, and how it affects on the density of this population. Then what is meant by birth rate, how it affects on the density of the population, and overall how this density, natality, mortality, all these factors affects finally on the population growth. So for this logistic growth we people saw, and one more type of growth, that is the exponential growth, right? So all these features we people have discussed in last lecture. Now we are going to talk about the population interaction in this session basically. So what is our today's topic? Our today's topic is basically the population interaction. So in population interaction, we people are going to discuss about the Gauss principle with this laboratory and field interaction. So I have already told what is mean by Gauss principle, and for this I have given some birds example, two birds example. Means suppose in Gauss principle there is a competition in between these two species, right? So only one can exist in that particular population or in that particular specific area. Okay, there is no scope for the other. So for this purpose, what happened? Ultimately, whatever the species which is dominated by the other one, or which one is the dominant and other is the suppressive one, which is get suppressed, right? So here in case of competition, what happened here? According to the Gauss law, the species which gets suppressed ultimately finds the another space or another habitat. Okay, then and then both will able to survive smoothly in that particular area. So this is the simple principle which was suggested by Gauss, or which is known as a Gauss principle. So as per the Gauss principle here, which type of population, how one can analyze this particular interaction. Now we are talking about the population interaction. So how we can analyze this population interact, or how we can study this population interaction. So for this, few methods were suggested. So which are that method and how one can apply this particular method? We are going to talk about that basically. So first method which is suggested by this Gauss, or as per the Gauss principle, is the line and belt transact method of population interactions study, and another method is the Quadrate method. So what one can understand with the help of this different method? So here we people can understand, or we can easily study or analyze this population interaction. So basically our topic is the population interaction, and for the study of population interaction we are going to learn these two methods which were suggested by Gauss, is the line transact method, belt transact method, and the Quadrate method. So what are basically this particular method that we are going to learn now? So very first we must know, before going to this line transact and belt transact, what do you mean by this transact? Okay, so as per this term, what this transact term indicates, the transact is nothing but the cross section along a long axis. What is it? A cross section. Okay, simple, a cross section along a long axis. So this transact is utilized in case of line as well as in belt. So what happened here, when the vegetation is to be studied, when we are interested suppose in particular vegetation, so when this vegetation is to be studied along an environmental gradient or ecotone, okay. So what is mean by ecotone? An ecotone is a transition area. Basically, what is it? It is a transition area between two biological communities where two communities meet and integrate, right? So here, when there is a transition area, a particular area where two biological communities meet, so that particular area is called as a ecotone. So what happened in Transact method? In Transact method, here the vegetation is studied along an environmental gradient. Okay, so especially whatever the vegetation is there in the particular ecotone, right, in the particular ecotone or environmental gradient, that particular ecotone or environmental gradient can be well studied with the help of this Transact method. Now here example of ecotone is given here: tropical to temperate, high or low rainfall areas, or precipitation gradient, adjacent areas with different types of soil, etc. So all these example, all these particular top areas one can understand with the help of this Transact method. Then what actually we are doing in Transact method? So in Transact method, a line is laid down. What we are doing? A line is laid down across a strand or several strands at right angles. So simple at right angles, here some lines will be made. So this method is called as a linear sampling method. What is it? This is one of the method of linear sampling method of vegetation, and we called it as a Transact method. Now in Transact method, depending upon the object of the study, two types of transact can be drawn. Okay, means it depends upon the types or object which we are going to analyze here. So one is the line transact, which is also called as a simple line intercept, and another one is the specific belt transact method. The extent of area determines the number and size of the transact. Okay, so extent means too much the area is wide. Extent means what? The dimension. So here dimension will decide. Dimension will determine the number and size of that particular transact. So when transacts are used to sample the vertical distribution of vegetation, that is stratification, they are called as a bisects. So here one important term which is coming here, bisect method, which we are going to learn. So what is mean by bisect? Bisect means when transacts are used to sample the vertical distribution of vegetation. So basically when we are going to analyze the vertical distribution of this particular ecotone, then that time they are called as a bisect. Okay, so whenever we are going to make the transact but at vertical position, then that time it will be known as a bisect method. Then line transact. Okay, so what is line transact? Line transact is a cross section, as we already saw in last slide, that it is a cross section along a long axis. Then what is actually line transact? In this type of a transact, the vegetation is sampled over a line without any width. So as such here width doesn't matter. So whatever the vegetation is coming throughout that particular line, okay, on that particular line, whatever it is, so that line vegetation or the line which is over that particular vegetation will be analyzed. So this line is laid over the vegetation with a metric steel. So how we are going to make this line? So with the help of metric steel tape or steel chain or long rope. So all these three units or this particular objects can be, or you can call it as a equipments. Okay, so which equipment we are going to handle for this particular purpose? We are going to handle, or we are going to use this equipment as metric steel we can use, then this metric steel tape we can use, then we can use the steel chain, or we can also handle, or we can also use this long rope for the purpose of this line transact method. So what we are doing here, this long rope or whatever it is, metric steel, so it will kept fixed with the help of pegs or hooks. Okay, so one more object here we are using to fix that particular steel tape or this long rope with the help of pegs or hooks. So what are that pegs and hooks? That we are going to see in next slide. So this line will touch some plant. So what will happen when we are going to make this line transact? So obviously it will touch some plants on its way from one point to the another. Okay. Then what this observer will do? This observer will start the recording to start this recording of these plants from one end and will gradually move towards the other end. So this is how from one end towards the next one, this particular vegetation will be analyzed with the help of this line transact. So from this type of transact, following information could be collected. So which type of information could be collected with the help of line transact method? So here you people can see. So very first, the number of times each species appearing along the line. Okay. So how many number of times the species are coming in that particular line? Then second, the trend of increase or decrease of distance between the individual of species. So how much distance is there in between these two species? Then the percentage of occurrence of different species. So how much percentage of that particular species is there? So percentage of species occurrence will be analyzed with the help of this line transact method. So it will be in relation to the total species, obviously. Right. So with the help of particular distance, here the repetition will be calculated, repetition will be analyzed, then percentage will be analyzed, percentage of different species occurrence will be analyzed, etc. So these are the outcomes of this particular line transact method. Then from this observation, in a number of such a parallel line transact, what can happen? We people can make the comments. Okay, we have to make the comments, or we called it as a description. Means what we exactly analyzed from that particular line transact method in suppose that X vegetation, right? So comments can be made on the habitat and other environmental condition on different portions of the transact. Okay, means you have to describe it properly. We called it as a make the comment. Okay, so comments will be made accordingly. Means what is the habitat, what is its percentage, etc. Percentage of that particular vegetation. So every species has its own ecological amplitude and tentatively express the status of available water and other edaphic conditions. So what happened? Any X species, when it describes or when it shows its particular status, so with its status, it try to tell us its habitat, the atmospheric condition, weather condition, water condition, etc. So we call it as a edaphic condition. So remember one thing here, any X vegetation, suppose it grows in that particular area, so with its growth, it always try to tell us the edaphic conditions, its habitat, etc. with its growth and development. So this is one of the important outcome we can say regarding this line transact method. Then as I said here, atmospheric humidity can be understood, then availability of light, grazing and other biological pressures, etc. Okay, so we togetherly we called it as a edaphic condition. So with this percentage or type of the particular vegetation, one can easily analyze this edaphic conditions. Then what is next to this line transact method? What is mean by this belt transact method? So this belt is a long strip of vegetation. Basically, what is it? It is a long strip of vegetation of uniform width. So this thing is totally lack in case of line transact method. So the width of the belt is determined according to the type of vegetation. So as per the vegetation, one can decide this particular width of that particular belt. Then in close herbaceous vegetation, it is usually 10 centimeter. Means these are the maximum or approx type of width which are decided actually. In close herbaceous vegetation, it is usually 10 centimeter, but it varies from 1 to 10 meter also in case of woodland. Means when the vegetation is changed, woodland vegetation is different and the usual vegetation is totally different. The length of the vegetation is determined according to the purpose of study. Okay, so here width will be decided accordingly, as well as length of that particular vegetation will also be decided accordingly. Means as per the type. Then next, as I told you, the pegs and hooks which are utilized in this particular transact method just to hold that particular line or just to hold that particular belt. So if a transact is essential, then the line should be marked using deep-seated wooden pegs. So how one can make that particular line? So we can make this line with the help of this deep-seated wooden peg. So in this picture, you can easily observe what is this, this wooden pegs, etc. The belt could be kept isolated by installing tall wire net fence on all its sides, keeping safety space from the lines. So this slide basically gives you the idea about the objects which are responsible to hold your line or to hold your belt. Okay, so that belt can be held with the help of this wire net, or your line can be line could be held with the help of this wooden pegs. Then what is the features associated, or what are the features associated with this belt transact method? So belt is generally studied by dividing it into some equal size segments. So belt will be helpful first of all to make some equal segment. The length of each segment is generally equal to the width of the transact. So here the features are given. Length of each segment will be usually equal to the width of the transact. Then these segments are sometimes called as a quadrates. Okay, so here you can understand in next slide we are going to learn about the quadrates. Okay, so these segments are sometimes called as a quadrates. Okay, so what is mean by quadrates? From this also we people can understand. The belt transacts are used in determining and understanding the gradual change in abundance or dominance. Means suppose you are interested in the dominancy of the species, frequency of the species, growth of that particular species, or which type of diversity is there. So all these things can be easily analyzed with the help of this transact method. Okay, so here basically gradual change in abundance, then dominance, then frequency and distribution of different species in the transitional region between two different types of vegetation, and which we called it as a ecotone, right? So these are the outcomes one can say here regarding the belt transact method. Then one more is there, that is bisect method. So bisect means the structure of vegetation with regard to the relative height, depth and lateral spread of plants in both aerial and underground plants, which can be easily determined. So here question arises, what is the difference between the previous method and this one? Previously we saw the line method, and here we are going to talk about the bisect method. Okay, line method, then belt method, and now we are going to talk about the bisect method, right? So here in previous method means line transact and belt transact. Okay, what happened here? As such, whatever the species which are grown, that could be analyzed, that could be studied with the help of that particular line transact or belt transact. But here the whole part of the vegetation or whole part of each and every plant almost can be analyzed with the help of this bisect method. So whole part means what? Both aerial as well as underground plants, because whenever we are talking about the plants, we know this thing very well. The plant shows these two parts. These roots are there as well as stem part is there. So stem part basically is the aerial part which is above the ground, above the soil. We can observe it easily. But some underground part is also there. We called it as a roots. So remember here in bisect method, we can observe or analyze, we can study the whole plant, means we can study the aerial part also, and we can study the root plant also, root part also, underground part also. Okay, so that whole parts of the plant can easily analyzed with the help of this bisect method. So here the extent of different aerial and underground parts are carefully measured and plotted to scale on coordinate graph paper. So with the help of this graph paper, here aerial view will be analyzed as well as underground part will be analyzed by using the bisect method. So this is the major significance as well as you can say the difference between this line transact, line belt transact and this bisect transact. Now what this method reveals us? So it is the form and interrelationship of underground systems of different species growing in the community, and also their relationship to different types and all layers of the soil. Okay, so this bisect method gives us the idea, as I already told you, it gives us the idea, the overall analysis of that particular plant and what are the interrelationship of this plant, means what is the relationship or interaction of one plant with the other plant, including its aerial part as well as the underground plant, with including its soil part also. So the bisect studies provides the following information here. This information, or you can say the benefits which are enlisted here. First is the rough floristic picture of the community. It gives us the idea about the rough floristic picture, means the overall floristic picture of that particular vegetation or community. Then this stratigraphic distribution of different species, how means the stratification we called it as, utilization of space, how much area is utilized by this particular species or different species. Then underground structure of that particular plant. As I already told you, the underground part can also be analyzed with the help of bisect method. And lastly, the arrangement and extent of root system, how the roots are arranged. Suppose different species are there and how differently the roots are arranged for this particular different species, etc. So all these things will be provided, means this much information will be provided, this much type of analysis, description we people can understand, we people can make with the help of this particular bisect transact method, right? Then lastly, this quadrate method of population interaction is also there. Okay, so this is different type of method. Why it is so? Because here quadrates are made. Quadrate means what? The square. Okay, so here squares are made for the purpose of this particular population study interaction. Okay, so this quadrate is a square sample area of varying size. Okay, so variable sized quadrants will be made or marked off in the plant community for the purpose of detailed study. So first of all, here line is not made, bisect is not made, belt is not made, etc. So rather than this, a square is made, and that square, different sized square, will be nextly analyzed, means how much, what is the flora and fauna which is suppose included, which is suppose living in that particular area. So all this will be analyzed. Okay, so generally a number of quadrates are studied to acquire reasonably faithful data to realize different analytic and synthetic characteristics of the plant community. So here in this particular slide you can see only plant community is mentioned, but remember here some animals, whatever the small animals, small insects suppose are there in that particular area, so that can also be easily analyzed, okay, or studied with the help of this quadrate method. Then what are the features regarding this quadrate method? So it is the effectively used to determine the exact difference or similarities in the structure and composition between two or more plant community. Suppose you are interested in the exact difference in between these two communities, not only difference but similarity, means suppose X community is there and Y community is there in the particular vegetation, and you are going to analyze it. So what will happen here? With the help of quadrate method, you can easily study what are the differences in the X and Y community and what are the similarities in X and Y community. So all these things will be easily analyzed by using these different size squares or quadrates. So this quadrates can be of 4 types. Now you people can see here. First is the least quadrate. Okay, so enlisting the names of different species growing in the quadrate. So it is the basic quadrate. So this quadrate will gives you only the idea about the different communities or different species, means which type of species or variety of species is habitat is there in that particular location. Then second, it will help out this least code quadrate. So what is this least code quadrate? This records the number of individuals of each species. Okay, so different or variety of species is there, but with its it will gives us the idea of the variety of the species as well as their number is also. Means what is the number of A variety, what is the number of B variety, what is the number of C variety, etc. So all this can be listed with the help of this least count quadrate method. So here in least count quadrate method, what happened? We can study this biomass. Biomass, what is meant by biomass? That I have already told you in previous lecture. It is nothing but the dry weight of that particular organism, right? So here the study of biomass or weight of each species. All individuals are uprooted, but when the weight of a particular organ or branch, leaf and fruit are to be determined, only the concerned organ is clipped or harvested and its fresh or dry weight is recorded. So what happened? A particular part of each species or each variety is selected, it will be dried and then it will be analyzed. So this is about the least count quadrate method. So it will help us to analyze not only the variety of the plant or variety of that particular species, but their number also. So here what we are doing in this quadrate method, the method is briefly explained. So demarcation or laying out of different types of quadrates are basically same. Then the generally an adjustable wooden frame is prepared. So what we are doing here, wooden frame which is prepared, perforations at regular intervals on each arm, right? Then 4 arms are fixed in the field with the help of long nails or surveyor's hook, and it is ready to provide data necessary for least count and clip quadrate. Okay, so here basically the wooden frame is utilized. So first of all, this wooden frame, as I told you that variety of different size quadrants can be used or same size quadrants can be used. So when you are interested in this quadrate method, so basically most of the people are following the same size quadrant. So here these wooden frame quadrats are fixed in that particular location accordingly, and then you can analyze each type of variety with this least, then least count and clip quadrate method. So here in chart quadrate, more nail or hooks are fixed to be perforation or quadrate arms at regular interval. So it depends upon the variety which is present in that particular vegetation. So nails of opposite arms are connected by threads to divide the plot into number of small quadrates to facilitate the recording of the area covered by the individual plant or coordinate paper in the scale, right? So here the paper which is used for this or nails are which are pointed in opposite arm, etc. So all these things you people have to follow according to the type of vegetation which you are going to learn in that particular location. So this is the way how you are going to analyze by using this, how you are going to analyze this population interaction or diversity of this particular population with the help of this quadrate method. So it is just the way of analysis for this particular quadrate method which is mentioned here. So when such a wooden frame are not easily available, it can be replaced by long threads or ropes. So as I told you, for the purpose of quadrate method here, so same size wooden frames can be utilized which are fixed accordingly, and then the type of vegetation or this particular species can be analyzed. Number can be calculated. But suppose these wooden frames are not available, then that time that wooden frames can also be replaced, or substitute for this wooden frame will be the long threads or the ropes. Means you can also utilize these long threads or rope to make the particular quadrates. The best size of the quadrate to use in the community should be determined with care. Okay, so here some size which are fixed one, so you should have to take care by determining the size of this quadrate. So it should be large enough and enough quadrate should be studied to produce this reliable result. Means here size of the quadrate you should have to analyze first of all. Approx size, whatever the standard size of quadrates are there, that you have to analyze or that you have to fix first of all. Then the size of quadrates to be used in a given community is determined by constructing a species area curve. So you should have to follow first of all the species area curve. Then once it is decided, then you can easily handle that particular quadrate method. So how you can do this particular, here the method is mentioned. This is done by sampling the vegetation with nested quadrate method. Okay, so one nested quadrate method is given here. So by which means you have to sample the vegetation with the help of this nested quadrate method. So that particular method is mentioned here. So this nested quadrate method, idea about the nested quadrate method. So as such, remember here one thing, the nested quadrate method separately is not mentioned in your syllabus, but you just know, for the sake of awareness, here I am going to tell you what is this nested quadrate method. So nested quadrate method are the series of quadrate method. So what is it? So it laid one over the other. It just laid one over the other with gradually increasing size. So figure or picture in that particular form, you people can see later on the picture of that nested quadrate. So it laid one over the other with gradually increasing size and can be practiced in the following way. So what are the requirements for this particular nested quadrate method? So which are just laid over one another. So long thread you will need, then you will need the surveyor's hook, then you will need the this measuring tape and graph paper. Okay, so these are the few equipments or objects which you will need at the time of this particular method when you are going to follow this method, that is nested quadrate method. So in this picture, you people can easily observe what is meant by this nested quadrate method, where this one particular quadrate is just laid down with the another, one over the another, right? So here 50 centimeter to 50 means 100 by 100, 150 by 150. So this type of scale can be made, or this type of measurements can be made in this particular nested quadrate method. So this is all about this population interaction, in which what we saw the various methods when suppose you are interested to study this population interaction. So basically two methods are there, Transact Method and Quadrate Method. Okay, so in Transact Method again subtypes we people were discussed, means line Transact Method, we saw belt Transact Method, we saw the Bisect Method. Then which one suppose is better, I also discussed about that. And what is the difference in between this line Transact Method and belt Transact Method, right? So one question you have to prepare with this two question, that distinguish in between this line Transact Method and Bisect Method, okay, or give the significance of the Bisect Method. So this assignment you have to complete on Google Classroom, and these are the two questions which you have to complete accordingly. Describe in detail about population interaction, means here detailed population interaction you have to explain first of all. And specifically second question is give a note on quadrate method of population analysis. So here in detail up to nested quadrate method you have to explain this quadrate method of the population interaction. So in next lecture we are going to talk on our next chapter, chapter 4, that is community. Thank you.